Subscribe to Mantold for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. The wind howled through the mountain pass, like someone screaming in the dark. I stood in front of a crooked wooden cabin, its roof full of gaping holes. In my hand, a torn map, barely holding together. Rain stung my face, icy, sharp. But it wasn't the wind that made me shiver. It was the figure, standing still, at the edge of the forest, staring straight at me. I unfolded the map again, a tiny red dot, right beneath my father's handwriting. You'll understand when you get here. My father had been gone 3 weeks. In his will, Ethan, my younger brother, got the ranch, the assets, everything. And me, I got this patch of land and a sealed envelope. Everyone in that room looked at me like it was a cruel joke. Melissa, my wife, didn't even wait for me to open it. She stood, arms crossed, and said, "I'm not living with a man who just accepts whatever comes." That night, she walked out. No goodbye. I drove 2 days from town to get here. The last stretch of road, little more than a faded scar through the forest, twisting, silent. When my car died a few hundred yards from the house, I walked. The closer I got, the stronger the smell. Rotting wood, cold breath rising from the earth. The figure at the forest's edge never moved. Maybe it was real. Maybe just the light, playing tricks. But my gut told me the red dot on the map and that person were connected. I climbed the porch steps, pulled the key from the envelope. The rusty lock clicked, dry, sharp. The door swung open, and a wave of damp and dust hit me, like the house was breathing in my face. A folded sheet of paper slipped from the doorframe. It landed at my feet. Inside it said, "If you're reading this, it means they know you're here. Don't trust anyone, not even your own blood." I looked up. Out the doorway, the figure at the edge of the forest was gone. There are memories you think are long asleep, until a will tears them wide open. My name's Brooks, 40 years old, a watchmaker in a small Midwestern town. Most days, I sit under a weak yellow lamp, bent over tiny gears smaller than a grain of rice, listening to the steady tick, tick, tick. People say I live a quiet, peaceful life. But deep down, I know it's a life that's slipping by, without leaving a trace. Since I was a kid, I've always been the one in the back row. Ethan, my younger brother, 3 years behind me, but always quicker, louder, and noticed. I remember one birthday. Dad could only afford one remote control plane. Ethan tore open the box, grinning ear to ear, and ran straight outside. I stood on the porch, book in hand, pretending I didn't care. But my eyes never left that plane. Not until it crashed, and one wing snapped clean off. Ethan left it there, off to find something else. I picked it up, spent hours trying to glue it back, only to realize Dad never once asked how I knew how to fix it. I grew up keeping that habit, standing still while others ran, quiet when they made noise. Then I met Melissa. It was at a fall fair. She wore a beige knit dress, holding a cup of hot cocoa. Her long brown hair lifted slightly every time the wind passed. She stopped at my watch booth, tilted her head at a scratched pocket watch. "Does it still run?" she asked, with a hint of challenge. I opened the case, listened, then smiled. "It runs, but it's tired." She laughed, a clear sound cutting through the crowd. We talked for nearly an hour. She asked about the tiny screws and why I chose this trade. Said she liked how patient I was. "That's what makes you feel safe," she told me. I believed her. 2 years later, we got married. The first years were warm. A small rented place, dinner together every night, weekends by the lake. I thought I'd found someone who'd stay. But slowly, her eyes settled on things I didn't have. A bigger house, a new car, trips far away. Whenever Ethan showed off his brand new house or his shiny pickup, Melissa would fall silent, then sigh. "You should open a shop in the city. Why not get a job at a big company? What's the point of staying here?" I'd smile, say I'll think about it. Truth was, I didn't think at all. I believed that if I stayed kind, stayed patient, things would be fine. Until one afternoon, a phone call shattered it all. It was a Thursday. I was replacing the leather strap on an antique watch. A man's voice came through the line, low, urgent. "Mr. Brooks Anderson, I'm calling from County Hospital. Your parents were in an accident on the highway. You should come right away." The tiny screwdriver slipped from my fingers, rolled across the wooden table, spinning slower and slower until it stopped. I just sat there, hearing the ticking from all the clocks in the shop, suddenly faster, more frantic. The hospital hallway was long, white, and blinding. A nurse led me into a small room. Ethan was already there, his shirt still crisp, but his hands clenched on the chair, knuckles pale. On a steel table nearby, 2 wedding rings lay side by side. One from Dad, one from Mom. Scratched, cold. I stared at them, feeling the air drain from the room. The funeral came and went quickly, as if someone wanted to shut the door on the past as fast as they could. I handled the paperwork. Ethan greeted the guests. Melissa stood by me, holding my hand. But it felt like there was thick glass between us. She didn't cry, just stayed silent, and that silence felt colder than winter wind. A week later, we sat in the lawyer's office. Dark wood walls, the smell of old paper mixed with cold coffee. The lawyer, a silver-haired man, opened the file. According to the legal will, made 2 years ago, he read Ethan's share first. The ranch, the house, the savings. Ethan nodded, like he'd known all along. The room was still, only the sound of turning pages. Then the lawyer looked at me. Brooks Anderson will receive a parcel of land in the Wyoming mountains with everything on it, along with a sealed envelope. From Mr. William Anderson. You'll understand when you get there. D. I heard every word, but it took a few seconds to believe he hadn't made a mistake. A strange piece of land, instead of everything else. The question tore through me. What was I in their eyes? Ethan smirked. Guess they thought you'd fit better somewhere quiet. Melissa erupted. A piece of wilderness. You're just going to sit there and take it. We argued all the way home. She called me weak, said I didn't know how to ask for anything. That night, Melissa packed her things. Didn't look back. The door slammed, and the empty space it left made the ticking clock on the wall sound like nails being driven into my chest. I sat alone, placed my father's envelope on the table. The paper was yellowed, its corners stained. The words burned into my eyes. You'll understand when you get there. I didn't know what was waiting. An abandoned cabin, an empty field, or something Dad had kept hidden from everyone. 3 days later, I locked up the shop, packed a few clothes, the map, and the envelope into my coat pocket. Then I drove toward Wyoming. I didn't know. I was stepping onto a road my father had spent his whole life preparing. Just for me. The road into Wyoming wound through the mountains like a strand of silver thread. I drove 2 days, past towering pines and silent valleys, where the only sounds were the wind and my tires grinding over gravel. When the fuel gauge dipped low, a weathered wooden sign appeared. Welcome to Silver Creek, a tiny town tucked in the valley. A few rows of wooden buildings, one general store, and a lone gas station. The thin man in a baseball cap filled my tank. Glanced at my license plate. Not many folks from out of state come through here, he said. You hunting? Or looking for someone? I handed him the old map. He studied it longer than I expected, then returned it with an unreadable look. The road to that place? Once it's dark, you'll lose it. Be careful. I couldn't tell if he was warning me or trying to scare me. But that look, it reminded me of the figure I'd seen at the edge of the forest. From Silver Creek, it took nearly an hour on a twisting dirt road. When the truck jolted over the last pothole, the cabin came into view, low, with weathered gray walls, and a tin roof stained with rust. It was surrounded by old pines, their rough trunks like black arms reaching up. The rusty lock clicked. A wave of damp air rolled out, cold and heavy, like a cellar forgotten for decades. I swept my flashlight across the empty room, a wooden table with one leg gone, a folding chair under a tarp, an empty picture frame hanging alone on the wall. The kitchen was barely a corner, a dented kettle on a wood stove, a jar of salt hardened into a lump. But on the sink, a single cup still held a few drops of water. Someone had been here, not long ago. The bedroom was at the end of the hall. As I opened the door, a gust lifted the curtain. On the floor, right where the light spilled in, lay a folded note. The scrawled words read, "If you're reading this, it means you opened something not meant for you." I froze. Was this what my father wanted me to find? Or was it a trap? From outside, the whisper of pine needles was broken by the steady crunch of footsteps on gravel. Slow, measured. I stepped onto the porch beam of light cutting through the dark. It swept over the yard, the wall of an old shed, and stopped at a fresh print in the mud. A bare footprint. My heart pounded. I aimed the light toward the tree line. Between two trunks, a figure stood still. Just enough light to see. They were facing me. "Who's there?" I called. The wind swallowed half my voice. The figure tilted their head, then slipped behind a tree. I backed into the house, locked the bolt. But when I returned to the bedroom, my stomach dropped. The closet door I knew was shut was now open. Inside, nothing but dark. And from that darkness, a voice called my name, faint, but clear enough to know it was meant for me. I stepped closer, pulled the door wide. The closet was empty, a few rusted hangers swaying. But at the back, a loose board gave way under my hand. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of damp earth and iron. I shone the flashlight inside. A narrow tunnel sloping down, shored up with old beams. What had my father hidden here, and why leave it to me? I ducked in. The tunnel dropped about 10 feet, opening into a small, rotting wood room. On a low table sat a few metal boxes, an oil lamp, and a leather-bound book. Faded on the cover, a 5-pointed star wrapped around the letter W. I opened the first page. Careful handwriting read, "Mining log, shaft no. 3, Silver Creek, Me 1923. I flipped through. Lists of silver ore, names of workers, and then a name that stopped me cold. Samuel Brooks. My grandfather. My father had told me stories about him, but never that he'd worked in a mine. The next pages recorded incidents in red ink. Collapses. Disappearances. No bodies recovered. One page was torn in half, its edge stained dark, like dried blood. The final entry was barely legible. Sealed. No one is to return. This must never be woken again. My hands shook as I closed the book. A memory surfaced. I was 8, falling asleep on the couch in my father's arms. His whisper in my ear, "There are things in our family you don't need to know. Until you're ready." On the shelf, a tarp covered something. I pulled it back. A miner's helmet. Inside it, a small folded note. "If found, tell my son. Never go down the mine." A sound above me cut through my thoughts. Footsteps. Someone was in the house. I killed the flashlight. Held my breath. The steps were slow, heavy. They stopped, right above me. "Brooks?" A deep, rasping voice. Drawn out. Unfamiliar. Then the steps moved away. The door upstairs closed. Silence. I climbed back up, heart hammering. In the bedroom, I stopped cold. The chair by the window had been dragged to the center of the room, and on it sat my father's envelope. The one I'd kept in my coat pocket. It was open, the paper inside sticking out, and below my father's words, a new line, the ink still wet. "You opened the right thing, but don't think you're the only one." The ink on the strange line was still wet. A sharp, metallic scent rose in the damp air of the room. I touched it lightly, black smearing onto my fingertip, as if the writer had just left. The beam of my flashlight swept around. Everything was in place, except the chair I'd left against the wall. Now it was turned slightly, like someone had sat there, watching the window. The curtain still swayed, and a cold draft slipped in, like a hand pressing lightly against the back of my neck. I knelt to check the floor. Besides the old barefoot print, a thin trail of mud led to the back door. In it, tiny specks of dull silver glinted, the same shade of ore I'd once seen in a glass jar on my father's workbench. The memory came rushing back, cold as water. I was 12, sitting cross-legged in the garage, watching Dad show me a piece of rock. "Silver," he'd said. But there was no pride in his voice. His eyes avoided mine, and he sealed the jar too quickly. I hadn't understood then. Now, the metallic smell pressed heavy on my chest. I stuffed the note back into the envelope, sealed it as best I could. Then I hurried down into the crawlspace, sweeping the journal, the paper from the helmet, everything into my backpack. Before climbing back up, I shut the loose board in the closet wall. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it made me feel less exposed. Darkness had swallowed the house. I sat in the living room without turning on a light. My phone lit up. A text from an unknown number. "Don't turn the lights on." A streak of white light cut across the window. It stopped, right outside my room. The beam didn't move, highlighting the threads in the curtain. I held my breath. 1 minute, 2, 3. The pounding in my chest drowned out the wind in the trees. When the light finally slid away, I exhaled, only for my phone to buzz again. This time, it was a photo. Me, curled in the dark, taken from outside, through the window. No caption, no explanation. Just proof I wasn't alone. I pushed away from the window, dragged a chair to block the front door. But nothing could block the feeling of being watched through walls. In my head, my father's voice rose from somewhere deep, like an echo from the bottom of a well. There are things in our family you don't need to know until you're ready. The night stretched on without end. I don't know if I slept or just waited for the sky to lighten. But when I opened my eyes, the first ray of sun slipped through the curtain, falling on the floorboards, where fine gray grit lay scattered. The same grit I'd seen near the mine. I stepped onto the porch. Fresh tire tracks cut across the dirt, edges still sharp, gravel scattered. I picked up a cigarette butt. It was still warm. Deep bite marks dented the filter. Whoever it was had been standing here, close. I slipped the butt into a plastic bag. Enough waiting. I had to know who was playing this game. I locked the door, drove toward town. Every shifting tree shadow made me tense. It felt like last night's eyes still clung to me, sliding through every patch of light. When the sign for Silver Creek Sheriff came into view, I was ready to tell everything. Or at least what I still knew, before something decided to silence me for good. The wooden door creaked as I pushed inside. The air smelled of strong coffee and old paper. Behind the counter, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, neatly trimmed mustache, looked up. Early morning for someone who looks like they've been running from something. I told him everything. The opened envelope, the mud, the silver ore, the photo through the window. When I said my grandfather's name, Samuel Brooks, the sheriff's eyes paused. Then he quietly opened a drawer. He set a small zip bag in front of me. Inside was a rusted metal disc, engraved with a star wrapped around the letter W. Whitlock and Sons, he said. The name that swallowed this town before 1923, and their law isn't written down. He told me about the collapse of Mine No. 3 dead, 2 missing. The company pulled out of Silver Creek, but in the memories of the townsfolk, Whitlock had never really left. You should know, Brooks. Around here, they don't like people digging up the past, especially Whitlock's past. I bit my lip. I just want to know why my father left me that land. The sheriff leaned forward, lowered his voice. If you want answers, find Mara Jensen at the Stillwater County Archives. But don't drag her in deeper than needed. People have vanished, for less. When I stepped out of the station, the weak morning sun was blocked by the shadow of a building across the street. On its steps lay a folded note. Don't pull outsiders in. They'll vanish again. I looked up. Across the road, the gas station man from yesterday stood, hands in pockets, eyes locked on mine. No smile, no nod, just silence. It felt like a deal had been struck without words, and I was certain I'd already lost. The county archives were in an old brick building. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of paper and damp wood. Mara Jensen, gray hair tied back, looked up from a row of files. I'm looking for everything on Mine No. 1923, and the name Samuel Brooks. Mara led me down the rows, pulled out a box of records. In the list of workers for August 1923, my grandfather's name was marked, voluntarily resigned, 2 days before the collapse. She set an old letter in front of me. The handwriting was hurried, slanted. Brother, they say we're digging silver, but what's coming up isn't silver. Last night, they moved into Shaft 2. The lights went out. The voices stopped. This morning, Whitlock sealed the entrance and paid for silence. I'm leaving town, but if I don't make it, burn my helmet. Samuel. The initials S. B. froze my spine. My father's voice echoed again. There are things not meant for the light. I was taking photos of the documents when my phone buzzed. A message from unknown, SC. You have no idea who she used to work for. Attached was an old black and white photo. Mara, years younger, standing beneath a sign, Whitlock Archive. I looked at her. She kept sorting papers, unaware I was watching her every move. Alley, or bait. When I stepped outside, clouds had swallowed the hilltops. By the time I reached my property, I could see the wooden gate hanging wide open. On it, my miner's helmet. The red paint had spread across it, forming the shape of a star around the letter W. Inside the helmet, the note, "Don't go down the mine," was gone. In its place, a scrap of charcoal drawing an arrow pointing to the house. Next to 2 scrawled words, "Go in." I gripped the helmet strap, took a deep breath. Only one thought remained. If they want me inside, then I need to know what they're hiding. I stood at the gate, my hand gripping the strap of the red-painted helmet. The charcoal words, "Go in," sat there like an order, cold and bare. In my head, another voice spoke, my father's. "If you open that door, there's no going back." But my feet moved anyway. The house was dark, swallowing the daylight at my back. I paused in the doorway, listening. The wind scraped at the roof. The groan of wood, like someone shifting upstairs. A smell of smoke drifted in. Not cigarettes. Lamp oil. I followed it to the kitchen. On the table, an oil lamp flickered. Beside it, a small wooden box. Its latch already undone, as if someone wanted me to open it. Inside, black and white photographs, edges singed. The first, a group of miners all avoiding the camera's gaze. The second, my grandfather Samuel Brooks, standing beside a man wearing a badge, a star wrapped around the letter W. The third almost made me drop it. A human shape, but with a bent spine, limbs too long, and eyes that reflected light like wet glass. Cold ran down my back. Dad, Granddad, they'd known, and they'd kept it from me. I remembered being small, falling asleep on the sofa in my father's arms, his eyes staring past the window, far away, heavy. I'd thought he was tired. Now I knew it was fear. A loud thud shook the ceiling above. Light flickered from my father's old bedroom. A shadow moved past the door crack. I climbed the stairs, heart pounding. The hallway was thick with darkness. The door stood ajar. Inside, Mara Jensen. Eyes wide, mouth taped. Hands bound. I tore the tape free. "Who did this?" She coughed, breath ragged. "They went down into the mine. To take what your father hid." Heavy footsteps echoed from below. Slow, dragging, as if hauling something. I tried to pull her with me, but she gripped my wrist, her eyes urgent, and something else. Not just fear, anticipation. She leaned in, whispering, her voice rasping like claws against thought. "And when you see it, you'll know why. It knows your name." Her words froze every joint in my hands. "It knows your name." I descended the mine stairs. Each wooden step groaned under me. Cold, damp air rose to meet me, mixed with the sweet rot of overripe fruit. My flashlight cut across stone walls, scarred with deep gouges, claw marks or something harder than metal. At the bottom, I stopped, listening. No footsteps. No wind, only the drum of my heartbeat in my ears. Part of me wanted to turn back. A sharp click sounded to my left. I swung the light, only a rotted beam. I exhaled, and something darted across the edge of the light. I swallowed hard, moved forward. The passage opened. In the center, an old iron chest, its lid slightly ajar. I hesitated, then leaned in. Inside, my grandfather's miner helmet, and a small journal. The first page shook in my hands. August 17th, 1923. They are not human. The light drives them back, but the voices still get inside your head. If you're reading this, leave Silver Creek. Don't let them know your name. My eyes locked on the last line. Don't let them know your name. But they already knew. Knew since when? Memory surged. 10 years old. Waking in the night to whispers outside my window. Brooks, Brooks. I'd thought it was a dream. Now, each syllable felt hammered into my skull from behind. A rustle snapped me back. I turned the light, and there it was. Tall, spine bowed like a twisted branch. Arms so long they brushed the ground. It didn't move closer, just tilted its head, its eyes reflecting like wet glass. A voice filled my head, clear as if it stood right behind me. "Brooks." I stepped back, the ground beneath my heel softening, sinking an inch. From the far end of the hall, shapes emerged. Figures in black coats, gas masks, each sleeve marked with a W star. One of them spoke, voice hoarse but firm. "Take him to Shaft 2. Just like his grandfather." I looked back at the creature. In its eyes, I didn't see myself now, but another me. Hair gone gray, face hollow, and eyes exactly like its. I couldn't look away from the reflection in its eyes. Another me, older, hollow-cheeked, but standing in this exact place. A rough hand clamped my shoulder, yanking hard. A black cloth dropped over my head. the stench of rubber and damp dust flooding my nose. No light, only the thud of boots on wooden planks, the clang of metal, and somewhere farther off, deep, steady breathing, like from the chest of something massive, hidden. They dragged me through tight turns, sloping down. Each time I stumbled, my head struck the freezing, wet rock. The smell of rust and damp earth grew heavier with every step. I tried counting to stay calm, but my heartbeat drowned out the numbers. Finally, the cloth was ripped away. I stood in a low-ceilinged chamber, the fluorescent lights above flickering on the edge of dying. Around me, rows of sealed metal crates. On each lid, the star wrapped around the letter W. Rust streaked down their sides like dried blood. The air was thick, cold enough to turn my breath white. The one leading me removed his mask. A hollow face, skin drained of all color. "Brooks, your family's been keeping it alive since 1923. I laughed, but it came out dry and empty. My father would never. He did. His eyes never left mine. He walked away, but left the key. And now, that key is you. I opened my mouth to argue, but he tilted his head, speaking each word like a cut. Remember the summer you were 10, the storm that broke the tree behind your house, and the eyes you saw in the dark? I froze. No one knew that, but my father. I had never told a soul. He motioned. 2 others pulled the tarp from the corner. Beneath it, a massive iron cage, its steel walls dented like something had rammed them. Inside, the tall, hunched thing sat curled, eyes closed, but its head tilted toward me, listening. Cold wrapped around my legs as the man stepped closer, his voice low, heavy as stone. "Either you help us take it to Shaft 2, or you take its place in that cage." I stood still, my hand locked so tight on the ring of keys, I couldn't feel my knuckles. Across the bars, the creature didn't move, but its eyes opened slowly, watching me, like a person waiting for an answer. "Why me?" My voice didn't sound like mine. The leader's answer rasped out, because it only follows its own blood. "Your grandfather? Your father? And now you." I stared into the cage. In my mind, the blurred photo of my grandfather, my father, night after night, staring out the window. And me, the 10-year-old boy hiding behind the curtain, listening to my name whispered in the rain. If I let it, maybe I'd live, but I'd take it back to a place no one returned from. If I refused, I'd die here, or worse, become it. The man handed me an oil lamp. "All you have to do is go down Shaft 2 and open the door. It will follow." I looked at the creature. Something shifted in its eyes. A faint tremor of light, a sound, soft and uncertain, slipped into my head. Not quite breathing, not quite words. "Brooks, don't leave me." My chest tightened. For a moment, I saw the 2 of us. No bars between, just 2 prisoners bound to the same fate. My hand shook. Then an idea flashed. If I chose neither side, I could break the board. I took a deep breath and smashed the lamp to the floor. Glass burst. Flames leapt high, licking the crates. The reek of burning oil tangled with rust. Black smoke spilling through the chamber. Shouts erupted. One man stumbled, his mask crashing to the floor. Fire bit into the cables overhead, sparks falling like molten rain. Heat lashed my face, stinging my eyes. In the chaos, I lunged for the cage. The keys slipped from someone's hand, skittering across the ground, and stopped at my feet. I grabbed them, the metal burning my skin, slid one into the lock. The click was small, but it cracked in my head like thunder. The creature's head lifted fully. Light flared in its eyes. Its breath quickened, slow and weak no more, but fast, urgent, alive. It tilted its head, staring straight at me. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw its lips move. No sound came, but I knew only I could hear it. "Now, it's your turn." The cage door screeched, a long, drawn-out cry of metal. It stepped out, slow, deliberate, and with each move, the air in the chamber seemed to tighten. Its shadow stretched across the floor and coiled around my feet. Behind us, the flames had swallowed the row of metal crates, smoke curling in thick black clouds. The Whitlock men scattered, some vanishing into side tunnels, others screaming for an exit. It came closer, lowering itself until our eyes met. In the firelight, I saw what clung to its thin wrist, a strip of worn, darkened leather, exactly like the one my father had worn all his life. My throat closed. Broken fragments of memory snapped into place. My father vanishing into the winter woods. And these eyes, this sadness. I'd seen them when I was still a child. An explosion shook the chamber. The rock ceiling split, a massive boulder crashing down, blocking nearly the whole way out. Smoke rolled in like a wave, swallowing every breath. It turned its head. Something flickered in its eyes, something close to a decision. It planted both hands against the rock, straining to lift it. Stone fragments rained down. Sharp edges sliced its shoulders and neck, leaving dark streaks. Blood or shadow, I couldn't tell. Go. The voice rumbled in my head. Low, tired, but certain. I slipped through the gap, feeling the heat lash against my back. At the base of the stairs, I turned. It was still there, eyes burning bright in the smoke and fire, and it nodded, just as my father had every morning before sending me to school. Then it stepped back and was gone. I burst out of the mine mouth, collapsing onto the cold ground, gasping for air. Behind me, a deeper explosion rolled through the earth, shaking the ground, and then silence. I left Silver Creek a few weeks later. No one spoke of the fire. No one asked what I'd seen. The town went on, as if that night had never happened. But I haven't forgotten, and I know it hasn't either. Tonight, at 3 a.m, I woke to the sense of someone standing by my bed. The room was dark, moonlight slipping through the curtain. On my nightstand lay something, an old strip of leather, still wet with a few drops of water. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to, because the moment my eyes found it, a voice called from the window, soft, but clear, as if right beside me. Brooks. I sat still. I didn't answer. I just listened. There are things in the dark that don't seek salvation. They only want to exist. Through the memory of someone, and now that memory is me.